welcome. Glad you're here. I tell you what, we just got new speakers, and that kind of shook the house. Did you feel that? It's like the place is vibrating with prophecy. It's good. And we are glad to continue a study. This is part 2 of 10 parts. And a couple things that I'm going to get in the habit of reminding us of. There are outlines. And when you come in, there's a table with some smiling faces. And you can pick up the outline. It has so much good information, so pick up the outlines, make sure it's the right one, and if you miss it, don't worry, you can pick it up on the way out. And also we have a stack still of the larger brochures, the colorful ones, that have the schedule, and it's pretty easy. It's the same time each night, not missing any nights, but you pick one of those up and share it with somebody. We'd love to have no more of those at the end. Get them all out so people could be here. We also want to remind you that there is food. You probably just saw it or had some, but if you're trying to fit it into your schedule, there's a meeting at 5:45, there's a break for food, there's another meeting at 7:30, and it was delicious tonight, so join us for that. And we want to remind you about your cell phones, if you haven't turned those off or silenced those. There's a lot of information in the presentation. We don't want to miss it or be distracted, so please help us out with that. And childcare is happening right now. On the weekends, both meetings have childcare. On the weekdays, the 5:45 one's the one to bring the kids and get them home at a good time for bed. But you can focus and know that they're in good hands and right here in the building being taken care of. And also want to highlight again that on Sunday night and moving forward, we will have available DVDs and other materials by Tim Roosenberg, sharing the same stuff from a different medium. And those will be available to you, just not quite yet. Can you be patient a little longer? We'll have those out on Sunday. And we do want to pause and pray over this study, so if you'd join me. Father in heaven, we believe that your word is living and active. We believe it's a gift, and it's inspired, and as it is open tonight, I pray we'd grow in it. I pray that it would make sense to us, and that we'd see your love through it, and we'd take a great deal of peace from the study, knowing that our God is in control, that he's faithful, he will keep all your promises, and we can trust you. So I just pray a blessing over this. I know that Tim has presented this many times, and he knows where he's going, but I pray that you would fill him with your spirit in a way that we could have an encounter with you through the word tonight. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Well, thank you, Tim. Come on up and lead us.
Thank you, Ryan. And we're looking at Islam. Okay. Get them synced for some reason. They got off whack here. Islam and Christianity in conflict. What do we have so far? We have from the time of Daniel to the end of sin and suffering is what Daniel 11 covers. Also, we have the king of the north and the king of the south go through phases, and Jesus is the prince of the covenant. He died right in the middle of the prophecy in verse 22. Now, the question is, what power follows Rome is going to be the next king of the north. Historically, Rome splits just like Greece does. When Greece splits, we get a north and a south. Jerusalem gets caught in the middle. When Rome splits, it splits in many different pieces, but again, we get a north-south split. And what do we have? Christian north, Islam south. Islam comes in from the south, and the Crusades strike back from the north. And Jerusalem gets caught in the middle. Well, one verse has 3 conflicts that it explains. Daniel 11, verse 29, it says, "At the appointed time he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter." So the first one, the former one, is the Crusades. That one's the Ottomans. And this one, the latter, is the time of the end conflict in verses 40 to 45. 3 conflicts between the same north and the same south. And in the Hebrew, it is the same powers here. Patrick Buchanan says this, "As for a climatic conflict between a once Christian West and an Islamic world that is growing in numbers and advancing inexorably into Europe for the 3rd time in 14 centuries. Whoa. Which number of conflicts are we looking at? Third. Daniel said there'd be how many? 3. Here's the good news. There are only 3 conflicts, which means even that it's nasty to have the third one, at least we can know we're in the third and final. See why prophecy is encouraging? How long has this conflict been going on in the Middle East? A long time, right? Well, friends, it's about to end, according to prophecy. Okay, so third time in 14 centuries? That's back since the breakup of Rome. So Daniel doesn't miss a thing here. So we're looking at this divided Roman time, and we have this little horn in there. Now, the king of the north is the same as the little horn of Daniel 7 and 8, which is the same as the man of sin in 2 Thessalonians 2, and is the same as the beast of Revelation 13. They're different names describing the same power. Somebody says, well, why didn't God just use the same name and make it less confusing? Question. How many names does Jesus have in prophecy and in Scripture? I'm not quite sure. I do remember it's a whole big long list, right? He's the Rose of Sharon. Does that mean he's a flower? No, but he's beautiful in what he does. He's Emmanuel, God with us. Each one of these names has characteristics that apply to Jesus. All right? Well, when we look at the other side, each one of these has names that apply the characteristics of that power. All right? It's the same kind of idea. Different names for one power that emerges from the Roman Empire and extends all the way to Christ's coming. Let's take a look. In your outline, you have, I believe it's 15 characteristics. We're going to go through them, and we're going to notice that we can identify who the King of the North is in our world today. Number 1, it starts from the time of Rome and lasts all the way to when God delivers his people. In the text, that's what it says. Let's look at it. Daniel 11:22, talking about the people shall be broken and also the prince of the covenant. That's when Jesus dies. The next verse has this new power arising. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully. Rome makes a league with itself somehow because it's reflexive in the the Hebrew here. Now, Daniel 2, you go from legs of iron to feet of iron and clay. Daniel 11, you go from Rome, in verses 20 to 22, to a league being made, same as the iron and clay. All right? You're at the same point in the flow. And how long does this league last? Yet he shall come to his end and no one will help him. That's verse 45. The next verse tells us when that is, and at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. So it starts right after the time of Jesus, or sometime soon after, and it lasts all the way till when God delivers his people. Okay, so it's going to be around for a while. The little horn, and I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one coming up among them. So you have, at the breakup of the Roman Empire, you have 10 horns coming out, 10 divisions, and then a little horn pops up. So at the time of the division, it comes out. How long does it hang around? I watched till the beast was slain and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. And when is that? Verse 26 explains that. And they shall take away his dominion, that's the little horns, to consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. Have God's people been given the kingdom on this earth yet? No. God's people usually end up on the receiving end of punishment from whatever kingdoms are out there. So this hasn't happened yet, so this is yet future. It starts from the time of Rome, from the breakup of Rome, and it's going to go all the way down to when God's people are delivered. Same thing we had in Daniel 11. The man of sin, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Whoa, first century, something's already starting to go wrong. Is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. So it's starting in the first century. It's going to come up out in the open a little bit later. And it's going to last until God takes it down when Jesus sets up his kingdom. All right. Same as we've learned before. The beast of Revelation 13. I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, like a bear, and like a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. This is Daniel 7 imagery. So you're bringing you up to Rome. And so it comes out of Rome. And I saw the beast, the kings of the earth and their armies, gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet, who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These 2 were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. So the beast comes up at the split of the Roman Empire, and it's going to last all the way down through the mark of the beast and everything else till God sets up his kingdom, and it's going to be taken down. So all of these descriptors agree that it starts from the time of Rome and goes to the coming of Jesus, or when God sets up his kingdom. Now, Luther, Calvin, Wycliffe, the Wesleys all taught the same thing about this. By the way, it was politically incorrect in their time. How politically incorrect? It put a price on their heads. That's politically incorrect. I have found myself and my team facing off with assault rifles over this one. The little horn, the power, king of the north, according to them, and I would agree with them, is the Roman Catholic papal system. Hear me carefully. Not Roman Catholic people, many of which God calls his people in Revelation 18:4. If God says he has a people inside the system, does he? Yes. So what I'm telling you is, I don't want you to leave here and say, this guy thinks that Roman Catholics are all lost. I don't believe that in the slightest. I actually believe there's going to be more former Catholics in heaven than former anything else. Because there have been more Catholics over more years than anything else. All right? Now, I do believe there will be former Catholics, former Adventists, former Baptists, former Pentecostals, former Methodists, Presbyterians, and all that in heaven. Did you notice I called them all former? Because in heaven, those barriers are gone and we're simply going to be God's kids. Yes! That sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It's coming. It really is coming. And so I'm talking about the system. And by the way, many of the Roman Catholic people were themselves victims of the system. We're actually going to see that the Pope acknowledges that. Now, let's take a look. Does the papacy fit? Number one, does it start from the time of Rome and go all the way to deliverance? How many powers out there right now have been around since the first century and are still around? Rome. They claim all the way back to the first century, don't they? Go look at their claimed list of popes. They're going right back to the first century. So yeah, it fits. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully. Oh, 2 Thessalonians, what did it say? It's starting in the first century, but it's being held in check and will come up a little later and then go all the way through to the coming of Christ or God's kingdom. So what happens? In the first century, there's starting to be some competition between two bishops on who's the most important, Alexandria and Rome. But what happened to any Christian leader in the first and second century that got a little too powerful? The pagan Roman Empire put an end to them. But we're going to find out that a league gets made. Get this, Jeremiah 18, God's people are clay. Iron is Rome, iron and clay. God's people and Rome come together and we get something called the Holy Roman Empire. Constantine unites the two early in the 4th century. And he appears to know what he was doing. Take a look at his coin. And by the way, I have a very similar coin with me that was minted by Constantine's government, which means it's older than any of you. Notice there's the cross, because he said Christians were now legal. But he also is letting pagans be legal. There's the sun. But there's Saul, the sun god, up the middle. Who gets more play, pagan or Christian? Pagans by far. Get this, 20% of his kingdom was Christian, 80% was pagan. He's a pretty good politician. And he mixed paganism and Christianity together. And the Christians went along with it because they weren't going to be persecuted anymore. We're still paying for that. That's why it gets critically important to go back to what does the Bible say, not what does tradition say. All right? Go for the Bible, and that's what we're going to be going by here. I noticed something about this coin, though, that really intrigues me. I haven't had a chance to do much studying on it yet. You know, it wasn't until much later that they discovered that the earth goes around the sun. He got in trouble for that. Take a look at this coin. There's Saul, the sun god. There's a chain coming from his waist over to the earth. And the earth is a globe. And it's going around him. Early 4th century. Somebody who wants to study astronomy, go back and figure out the history. That just looks interesting to me. It becomes deceitful. When the league is made, it's deceitful, right? Oh, I forgot something. When Constantine makes this league, he moves off to Constantinople, starts a new capital, and the Pope is in charge in Rome. But the Pope wants permission to rule in Rome and wear purple and several other things, because only the emperor's allowed to wear purple. And so in comes a document called the Donation of Constantine. You can Google that one, and you know what you will find? The Donation of Constantine was discovered to be a forgery. If you base your authority to rule in Rome on a forged document that you forge, is it with deceit? When the league is made, it becomes deceitful. No kidding. Daniel doesn't miss, because God doesn't miss. Now, 2 Thessalonians talks about man of sins being deceitful as well. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. Signs and wonders and lying deceptions. Oh, if you would just worship enough relics, that you would be given lots of special privileges. That's a deception. That's not from God's word. Also, it be small but powerful, for he shall come up and become strong with a small number of people. Another horn, a little one. And if you were to go to the Vatican tonight, you would find one of the smallest countries in the world. Just over 100 acres. But it would be one of the most powerful 100 acres on this planet. Very small, very powerful. What a combination. The Bible got it. Also, it would be peaceable and become rich. He shall enter peaceably even into the richest places of the province. He shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. He shall disperse among them the plunder, the spoil, and the riches, and he shall devise his plans against the strongholds. And for centuries, the Pope got to decide who the kings were. And if you wanted to be king and your brother wanted to be king, who's going to give the Pope the best offering? And that happened many times. Check your history. And through time, they were able to amass great wealth. If you visit the Vatican, are you going to find a poor place or a rich place? Very rich. It had a predicted time of power or supremacy. In Daniel 11:24, when it says that it would league would be made, it says, but only for a time. Daniel 7:25, then the saint shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. It has a limited time period. Okay. Revelation, the beast, but the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle that she might fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time, hiding from the beast's power. Oh, that's the same number we have in Daniel. By the way, time, 1 year, times 2 years, and half a time. That would be 3.5 years. Let's take a look at another way. Revelation records it. He, the beast, was given authority to continue for 42 months. Tell me how long that is. How many years? 3.5 years. So you have it as 1,260 times time and half a time and 42 months. Day for a year, you have 1,260 years. So, what we find is Pope Vigilus ascends the papal chair in 538 under military protection of Belisarius. Here's what's going on. Emperor Justinian in 533 decrees that the Pope is the leader of all Christianity in the Roman Empire. But there's a little bit of a glitch. The Pope is the Bishop of Rome, right? The Bishop of Rome is not welcome in Rome, because a group of Christians who disagree with the papacy on several things are in control of Rome. And so he tries to negotiate through this when it doesn't work. So in 538, he sends his General Belisarius in, and Belisarius. There's another B coming up. And enforces the Pope in the position. 1,260 years later, 1798, Napoleon's General Berthier takes the Pope out of position. 1,260 years later. Let's take a look at it. In 1798, Berthier made his entrance into Rome, abolished the papal government, and established a secular one in its place. Well, so what I find very interesting is the papacy has a 1,260-year time period. But Arab Islam and Ottoman Islam both have time periods in Revelation as well. You had 150 years for Arab Islam, and it's called the first woe. And then the second woe gives for Ottoman Islam, 391 years and 15 days. There's a guy by the name of Josiah Litch that predicted that the Ottoman Empire would fall in 1840. And a few months later, in early 1840, after he'd published his book in 1839, he said, I think I can be a little more specific. And he makes the date October 11, 1840. August 11. And so what happens? On August 11, 1840, the Ottoman Empire and events in Turkey, Egypt, and Lebanon becomes a protectorate of the European empires. And in Bible prophecy, as soon as you become submissive to another power, you're done as far as your prophetic time. It doesn't matter. Remember that Persia had 10 more kings after Xerxes. Once Xerxes had to submit to somebody else, it was over. Antiochus submitted to somebody else, Rome, it was over. You didn't look at it anymore. And once Turkey does it, they continue a little bit longer to the end of World War I, but they're now the sick man of the East until they're gone. So what's interesting, both the king of the north and the king of the south have time prophecies. And there are 3 woes in Revelation that match the 3 conflicts in Daniel. Now, if you're interested in who saw these woes and these time periods, in the back of my book there's an appendix, and it has about 120 different Bible commentaries that show where different people, how the different Bible commentators between 1100 and 1930s all saw this to be Islam in those woes and those time periods. It's kind of interesting. The sixth characteristic has a man in its head. Notice so far every one of these has matched the papal system. Has a man in its head. And in Daniel 11 it says he does this. In Daniel 7 it's the eyes of a man and a mouth, the spokesperson. And the man of sin, obviously a man, and the beast. All who dwell on the earth will worship him. And so if you take a look at the papal system, there's always a spokesperson. It's called the Pope. At this moment, it's Pope Francis. And this was Time magazine right after Pope Francis was named the new Pope. And I want you to notice something. Look at the title for it. It's not a Pope for the Catholic Church. It's not a Pope for Christianity. It is a Pope for the New World. Interesting wording from the media. All right? Now, you have a Pope for the King of the North who is a global religious and political power. But the King of the South has a Caliph who is a global political and religious power. Let me just tell you this. Every time we have a caliphate, it ends up having a holy war. You have Arab caliphates, you have the Crusades. You have Ottoman Caliphate, you have the Holy League. Time of the end, you will have a caliphate, you will have a holy war. By the way, what is a holy war? When both sides act like the devil in the name of God. And if you're acting like the devil, you're not of God. It would lead attacks against the south for that king of the north. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. Yes, those who eat of the portion of his delicacies will destroy him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. Both these kings' hearts shall be bent on evil. And they shall speak lies at the same table, but it shall not prosper, for the end will still be at the appointed time. While returning to his own land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant, so he shall do damage and return to his own land. What's going on here? In 634 to 637, Muslim armies sweep up out of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. They come up through here, back down and around and out this way. Which way did they hit Israel from? They came from the south. That would make them the what? King of the South. They take this area. 150 years later, they start to weaken, and the Pope calls for the Crusades to strike back. And he comes from which direction? So now you have the final king of the north and the king of the south in position. And you expect 3 holy war periods. Crusades, Ottomans, time of the end. We're in the third and final. Now, Revelation said 1 woe is past, behold, still 2 more woes are coming after these things. I've already talked about it briefly, but you can do the math, right? 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 woes. Let's take a look at this. First conflict in Daniel, first woe in Revelation. This area in red is the area taken over by the Arab Muslims. They were not able to take Constantinople. But the next wave, they do. Verses 29 to 39 talks about the Ottomans and the Reformation. It says, at the appointed time he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter. There is a time prophecy that explains this, but I don't have a whole hour to explain it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to flat out tell you what it means for the appointed time. The appointed time is from 1360 to the 1840s. All right? Now, if you want to watch a whole explanation of that, you have several options. One, I'm going to do it Saturday morning at what they call Sabbath school here at 9:30. There's a free option. Another free option, you might be able to find it somewhere on YouTube somewhere. Another way is you can get our book and read a chapter on it in the back. Actually, it's one of the appendices. Or you can buy a DVD once they're for sale. Just don't have time to get into it. But at the appointed time, from the 1360 to the 1840s, which happens to match the Ottoman Empire, he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter. Now, it won't be like the first one or the last one. In the first and the last one, the king of the north holds Jerusalem. In the second one, they don't. So there is a difference in that way of looking at it. Why won't they be able to get there? And it says in the next verse, for ships from Cyprus shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and rage against the holy covenant and do damage. So he shall return and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. So what do we have? The king of the north is going to head south again, but he's not going to make it because he's going to get stopped by ships from Cyprus. He's going to return home in a rage against the covenant, which would be either God or God's people. All right? So let's take a look at history. Here's what's happening. This island up here, it is Cyprus. Daniel says ships from Cyprus are going to stop him when he heads south. In 1571, Christians controlled Cyprus. And the Turks controlled all this area out here, and they wanted Cyprus. So they sent their fleet over here with thousands of soldiers, and they invade Cyprus. The Pope says, no, we cannot lose Cyprus. He puts together what they call the Holy League with a fleet of their own 300 ships, and the goal of the Holy League is to send their ships over here, take Cyprus, and then go get Jerusalem, or save Cyprus. They waited a little too long. Cyprus fell. They found out while they were on the way. And because the Muslims had double-crossed them and did horrendous atrocities, the Christian fleet was furious. The Muslim fleet left Cyprus and sailed this way. And the two fleets meet right in here in what is known as the Battle of Lepanto, 1571, October of 1571. I believe it's October 5, and conservative Catholics still celebrate the Battle of Lepanto in October of each year. It was a massive fight. 600 ships slamming together. In a matter of just a few hours, somewhere around 40 to 50,000 men died. It was no small fight. The war in Israel, 1,400 Israelis, and right around 10,000 Palestinians now. That's over a month. You have 11,000 killed. This was a few hours, somewhere in the 40 to 50,000 range. The Christian fleet was victorious. The Muslim fleet was decimated. But the Christian fleet is so badly damaged that it turned around and went back home without making it to Cyprus or Jerusalem. There's the first part. They're going to be stopped by ships from Cyprus. And where did those ships come from? Cyprus. So if you go to the Vatican, you're going to find this picture just outside the Sistine Chapel. It is a huge painting, bigger than this section of wall. And it was painted in 1571, celebrating the Christian victory of Lepanto. And obviously, you can tell the Muslims are on this side. Well, but there was space on the wall for another painting celebrating conquering Cyprus, and another one over here for celebrating conquering Jerusalem. What takes their place? Well, what's next in the prophecy? They're going to attack the covenant. The very next year, here's the paintings they put up. Because in 1572, you have St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, when in just a week's time, 70,000 Huguenots were killed. Their crime? This is in France. Their crime? They followed the Bible instead of the traditions of the church. They were following the covenant. 70,000 in just a few days. Again, what's happening in the world right now, these atrocities in the world are real, but they're not as big as what were happening back then at that time. And there were two paintings, one in the place of Cyprus, one in the place of Jerusalem. And Daniel said he's going to head south. He's going to be stopped by ships from Cyprus. He's going to return home in a rage against the covenant. And you can watch it happen on the Vatican walls today. It's all marked off there. Daniel doesn't miss. Why does God allow these Islamic invasions into the Christian world? Revelation tells us. But the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hand, that they should not worship demons and idols of gold, silver, brass, stone, and wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immorality or their thefts. What happened to God's people in Old Testament times when they started worshiping images instead of God? Did they gain or lose their protection? They lost it. What do you think is going to happen to Christianity when they start worshiping images? They're going to lose protection. And in comes relatives of the Abrahamic family again. This time it's Muslims. And what does Muhammad especially hate? Image worship. That's interesting, isn't it? Oh, but Christians really aren't worshiping the images. They're worshiping what they represent. That's exactly what the children of Israel said with the golden calf, and God didn't like it. Well, let's take a look at how God uses all things for good. Up here, during the Ottoman conflict, is a German monk. His name, Martin Luther. And the Pope wanted to come up here and wipe him out because he's challenging the Pope's authority. But the Pope couldn't do it. Why? The Turks were pushing in. And to go get Martin Luther, he's got to send an army up there because Martin Luther's got a couple of princes supporting him with their small armies. So that means the Pope has to get a bigger army to go up there to do it. But the Turks are pushing in, and he needs those German princes to come down and help stop the Turks. So he's got to leave Martin Luther alone for a little bit. The Turks stop pushing, and he starts thinking about getting Martin Luther, but here comes the Turks again. After a couple of rounds of this, you know what Martin Luther said? He said, "My greatest defender is the Sultan of Turkey." Get this. Because of the Turks pushing in from the south, the Pope couldn't stop the Reformation. And the Bible is printed in common languages, and righteousness by faith is taught again, and it would have been squelched if it wouldn't have been for the Turks pushing in from the south. Does God use all things together for good or not? Yes, he does. That's his promise. It would change times and laws. Daniel 11 is clear over and over that it will fight against the covenant. And they shall intend to change times and laws, the little horn, Daniel 7:25. Does the papal system claim they can do that? Definitely. Let's take a look at some of their own statements. The Pope is of so great of authority and power that he can modify, change, or interpret even divine laws. The Pope can modify divine laws since his power is not of man but of God, and he acts as vicegerent of God upon earth with most ample power of binding and loosing his sheep. Boy, that is driving some Catholics crazy because Pope Francis is leaning favorably toward same-sex unions. And you go to the conservative Catholic websites and they're going, can't the Pope read the Bible? Do you know what else they're calling him? They're calling him the AntiChrist. Catholics are. That reminds me, one time they asked Martin Luther what he thought about what the popes were saying to each other. And you did hear me say popes saying to each other. Because there were 2 or 3 popes all fighting to be the pope. And they were all calling each other the Antichrist. And they asked Martin Luther, what do you think about that? He says, I finally agree with all 3 of them. That they were calling each other the Antichrist. But anyway, so they claim they can do that. Converts Catechism. Which day is the Sabbath? Answer, Saturday is the Sabbath day. Question, why do we observe Sunday instead of Saturday? Answer, we observe Sunday instead of Saturday because the Catholic Church transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. Notice, they claim they changed God's law. Now, I don't agree that they can do that. That's why I'm a Sabbath-keeping follower of Jesus. You're going to have to decide what you're going to do with it, but I can't follow that system. Number 9, speaks great words or blasphemies. Then the king shall do according to his own will. He shall exalt and magnify himself above every god. He shall speak blasphemies against the God of gods. All right? He shall regard neither the God of his fathers nor the desire of women. That may be a reference to celibacy in the priesthood. Nor regard any god, for he shall exalt himself above them all. Daniel 7, the little horn. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High. 2 Thessalonians, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. In a little bit, I'm going to show you that one fulfilled in the Vatican. And then the beast, he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. Okay, so what is blasphemy? Jesus was nearly killed for blasphemy twice. Once, when he said, before Abraham was I am, which means he's claiming to be God. And they were going to kill him for that. The other one was when he claimed he could forgive sin. They said only God can forgive sin. But if Jesus is God, he can forgive sin. I do know this. I'm counting on Jesus' ability to forgive sin because he's God. If he can't do that, we are all in big trouble because the wages of sin is death. So, yep, I'm counting on Jesus being able to do it because he's God. But does the papacy claim this? We find they claim both of them. Let's take a look. The Pope is so great of dignity and so exalted that he is not a mere man, but as it were God, and the vicar of God. The Pope is called most holy because he is rightly presumed to be such. He is likewise the divine monarch and King of kings. That's a title for Jesus. Hence, the Pope is crowned with a triple crown as King of heaven and of earth and of the lower regions. So he's not only King of this earth, he's King of hell and he's King of heaven. He can tell God what to do. And we find that they actually teach that they can. The Pope is, as it were, God on earth, sole sovereign of the faithful of Christ, chief King of kings, having plenitude of power. The Pope is not only the representative of Jesus Christ, but he is Jesus Christ himself, hidden under the veil of the flesh. Gives you a taste of some of the statements they've made. Now remember, in Thessalonians it said he would be sitting in the temple as if he were God. Well, take a look at this one. That's Pope Benedict. Catholic television, I just took a video and I froze one of the frames. I mean, the Catholic Church put out the video. I got it from the papacy's own website. It says he would be sitting in the temple as if he were God. In the temple, on each side of God's throne, of the judgment seat, is an angel on the Ark of the Covenant. And here's the Pope sitting on a seat between the two angels. That's Old Testament imagery. New Testament imagery, in Revelation, Jesus sits on the great white throne. In the throne room in Revelation, around the throne are 4 living creatures. On the platform are 4 men. If you know biblical imagery, you can pick it right off of that picture. He's sitting as God, as if he were God in the temple of God. This isn't somebody else's picture. This is theirs. Now, if I was the Pope, I'd want to fire the art department for putting this stuff together. But there are so many of these that they must be intentional. Rebutting a belief widely shared by Protestants and a growing number of Roman Catholics, Pope John Paul II on Tuesday dismissed the widespread idea that one can obtain forgiveness directly from God and exhorted Catholics to confess more often to their priest. Why would that be? Take a look at this Catholic writer, Michael Mueller. Seek where you will, through heaven and earth, you will find but one created being who can forgive the sinner, who can free him from the chains of hell. That extraordinary being is the priest, the Catholic priest. Yes, beloved brethren, the priest raises his hand, he pronounces the word of absolution, in an instant, quick as a flash of light, the chains of hell are burst asunder, and the sinner becomes a child of God. So great is the power of the priest that the judgments of heaven itself are subject to his decision. They claim they're in charge of heaven, hell, and the earth. So here's the story. If I do something wrong, I go to the priest and I ask for absolution and forgiveness. But what if he doesn't like me? What if what I did was something to make him look really bad? And he refuses. Hey, I can get around this. I move. I go to another parish. And I make friends with the priest, and then I go ask for forgiveness. And this priest says yes. Which priest will God obey? Ever heard of power corrupts absolute power absolutely corrupts? Do you know who that saying was coined after? It was from a historian that was studying the papacy. And if you think you have power to send people to heaven or to hell, here's an interesting one. In Martin Luther's day, the Pope sent Martin Luther to hell. A recent Pope brought him back out of hell. Which Pope does God need to obey? Just wondering. I'm just pointing it out, not intending to make fun of. It's just, to me, ridiculous that a human being thinks they can tell God what to do. Especially when human beings are known to be corruptible. And by the way, don't you ever give any church leader in any denomination absolute power, because it will absolutely corrupt them in your church. No human can control absolute power. Only God can. It's not just a Catholic problem. It would persecute God's people, the saints. Oh, maybe you need to know what a saint is. A saint in the Bible is any living person trusting in Jesus Christ. That's the New Testament definition of a saint. It's not somebody that the church says is a saint years after their death. So they're going to persecute the saints. So let's take a look at this. Daniel 11:33, yet for many days they shall fall by sword and by flame. That's during the Ottoman time period when they were actually burning people at the stake. Daniel doesn't miss. Daniel 7:25, he shall persecute the saints of the Most High. The beast of Revelation 13, it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Yep, that's the period where people were being burned at the stake. Why did so many people flee the old world to come to the new world? Because it was really easy over here? No. Because they wanted religious freedom. They were willing to risk all kinds of things to get it. Pope urges forgiveness for centuries of wrong. The Pope says the Roman Catholic Church must mark the year 2000 by acknowledging its members' sins, including intolerance in the name of religion and complicity in human rights crimes. As the second millennium draws to a close, the church should become more fully conscious of the sinfulness of her children, recalling all those times in history when they departed from the Spirit of Christ. Goes on to talk about the Inquisition, the Crusades, and all kinds of other martyrdoms that happened. I can only tell you I've met priests since then that didn't get the memo. We were working down in Ecuador, doing about a 3-week Bible teaching seminar. I will just tell you, Ecuador is Roman Catholic by constitution, which means the local priest has great political power. You don't present this topic there. You let people read between the lines and figure it out on their own. You're going to get in enough trouble the way it is. And sure enough, we got in trouble. Here's how we figured that out. In the middle of the night, 4 men, 3 of them with assault rifles, showed up to our hotel. And they started pounding on the hotel owner's door. She opens the door and she's met by assault rifles. Get your keys. We want you to open some rooms. Well, the man in the business suit is the chief of police. The 3 guys with assault rifles are soldier, policemen, whatever you call them in their community. And at gunpoint, she is told to start opening up our rooms. You want a nasty wake-up call? They miss my room, but here's what happened to my 2 teenage daughters. They hear commotion outside their room. They hear the hotel owner saying, but they're just children, niños. But my daughters know Spanish fairly well. And they're getting a good idea of what's going on, and they hear the order to open the door, and the key goes in the door opens, and somebody reaches in, hits the light switch, and guys with assault rifles come across the room demanding their passports, which they do not have. I had them in another room. A few moments later, they went to another room in our group, and my daughter slipped out of their room, came around the corner. My room was just around the corner, kind of hard to see around there, and I guess they thought it was a supply closet or something back there, and they missed my room. And they were waking somebody else up, and my daughter slipped into our room. And in the morning, we had a talk with everybody, and we decided, you know what? And talked to the hotel owner, and she says, here's what's up. The priest is mad at you. So mad that I'm not allowed to have anybody check into my hotel as long as you're here. There's a seal on the two front doors. Break the seal and you go to jail. They left the back door open for us to leave. But she can't check any new customers in. We talked to her and she's game to go along with us. So I headed down to the U.S. Embassy in Quito. Called for a taxi. Made it nice and public. Hey, I need a taxi. Want to go down to the U.S. Embassy? I figured we're being watched. My wife and I go down to the U.S. Embassy. We talked to them about something else. We never mentioned what happened overnight. We didn't want them to tell us to go away and be nice. I figured if Paul can use being a Roman citizen to spread the gospel, I can use being an American citizen. And in Ecuador, they were just getting ready to transfer away from what their paper money called sucre and replace it with something called U.S. dollars. I figured they didn't need an international scene at the moment. And so we went down there, talked to the people about something else, came back up, and we put one of our team out front with a sign that said, back doors are open, come on around. And inside there was a courtyard with a meeting hall in it, and we continued our meetings for the last week of them. We finished. And they decided not to cause any more trouble. Because we'd said, send the message back to the priest and the police, try that again, and we'll make an international incident out of it. We finish sharing the gospel. That's not the only city I've run into stuff like that in. I'm here to tell you, when the system thinks they can get away with it, they will play the bully card really quick, still. Deadly wound healed in worldwide power. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and its deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. Well, that wound was in 1798 when the people thought the papacy was wiped out. But obviously it wasn't, because it's back around, right? 1929. Here's what the San Francisco Chronicle said. The Roman question tonight was a thing of the past, and the Vatican was at peace with Italy. And affixing the autographs to the memorable document, healing the wound, extreme cordiality was displayed on both sides. Oh, healing the wound? In 1929, the San Francisco Chronicle is using biblical languages. I think that was an accident. If you were to look in the 1920s and 30s and 40s into Webster's dictionary and look up what's scarlet woman, they would tell you it's the Catholic Church. You look that up today, you won't find anything like that. It's politically incorrect now. It's been taken away. Triumphal return. Pope John Paul II comes in, and he's a charismatic leader, and he takes the papacy up into great powers. Pope Francis, hey, he wants to be president of the world. Huffington Post is ready to endorse him as such. Deadly wound healed and comes back with great power. All right, I decided to do a power graph one time, what I call a power curve. You have the papacy from 538 to 1798, 1,260 years. God's people are persecuted during that time. Then you have 1929, they begin their resurgence. And eventually it says they will hit the peak of power when all the world follows them, and they will come to their crashing in right afterwards. All right, I got curious. I wonder what the Muslim power curve looks like. Now get this. I've actually taken classes in high school on Muslim history. just because it matched my schedule. I was trying to figure out ways to load up in such a way that I could overload on school and still work and go backpacking one semester each year. And so I ended up taking Muslim history. Who knew I was going to need that? And so I actually knew the dates pretty well, and I just graphed over it. Take a look how similar. Arab Islam up to the Crusades, then the Ottoman Islam, then they're down, and they come back. And what we're going to find out on Monday night is there are time of the end allies for this conflict that Revelation gives us. And once you see that, you will see how it is happening all around you. But you have all this power curve, very, very similar. Now, it would be diverse or different from other kingdoms, and subdue 3 horns. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the first ones and shall subdue 3 kings. So let's take a look at something. The area that the papacy controlled of the European Empire broke into what were basically called the 10 barbarian tribes. The Heruli, the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals were overthrown because they disagreed with the papacy on the Trinity and several other things. And that's what was involved in 538 with the city of Rome there, was overthrowing Arian believers. And so 3 were overthrown, and it was different than the others because the first ones were political, but this one was political and religious. Number 14, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. And so many people get excited about this one. 666. It's only mentioned in one of the areas, it's not in all 4, which tells me it's least important, not more important. All right? But yes, this fits as well. Let's take a look. In the donation of Constantine, the title for the Pope is Vicaris Filii Dei. And in hundreds of other papal documents in Latin. And if you take the numerical value of that, V's a 5, I's a 1, C's 100, A 0, R 0, I 1, V 5, S 0, 1 and 12, F 0, I 1, L 50, I 1, 53, D 500, E 0, I 1, 501, total it up, it's 666. When you take the number of his name. And number 15, the dragon's throne. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Now, the dragon can be Satan, but it can also be the power he was working with, and in Revelation, Rome is called the dragon. Take a look at this. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. Well, that's Satan, right? Yeah, it is. But what kind of soldiers killed the babies in Bethlehem trying to kill Jesus? Roman. What kind of soldiers actually killed Jesus at the cross? Roman. Who's Satan working through? Rome. Who gives their capital or seat of authority to the papacy? Rome does. Satan working through Rome. It's the same pattern. To the secession of the Caesars came the secession of the pontiffs in Rome. When Constantine left Rome, he gave his seat to the pontiff. Where did the papacy get their power and authority? From Rome. But they got something else other than the place. They got a title. Pontiff Maximus. You ever heard of Pontiff Maximus, right? The Pope. Well, take a look at this coin. Tiberius Caesar. You flip the coin over. Tiberius Caesar. Who was Caesar when Jesus was killed by the Romans? Tiberius was. So this is the guy that is responsible for Rome when Jesus is killed by the Romans. You flip it over and look at the title Tiberius was going by. Pontiff Maxim. Which means the great high priest or great bridge builder, the one between gods and man. And the Pope says he's the one between us and God. If you want to be saved, you got to come through the church to be brought to God. Whoa, that doesn't come from the Bible. That comes from Tiberius, the one that had Jesus killed. Whoa. If I'm a Christian leader, the last title I want is the title of the Roman emperor that's in charge when Jesus dies. But that's the title they take because it has power and authority. So, yep, they get the capital or the seat of government. Rome gets the city of Rome, but Islam gets the other capital of Rome, Constantinople, which is now called Istanbul. King of the North gets one capital, King of the South ends up with the other one. Isn't that interesting? Now, who is this power? I agree with Luther, Calvin, Wycliffe, the Wesleys, that it is the Roman Catholic papal system, not Roman Catholic people, many of which God calls his people at this time in history. All right? So don't leave here thinking this guy thinks only that Roman Catholics won't be in heaven. I believe all kinds of folks, former lots of things, are going to be there. All right? But they're all going to be children of God there. So what do you need to remember from tonight's presentation? Well, when the Roman Empire breaks, Islam hits from the south, Christianity hits from the north, and the Pope calls for 3 holy wars. The Crusades, the Holy League during the Ottomans, and yes, friend, the Pope has already called for a holy war against radical Islam. You may have missed it. It was August 7, 2014. We'll get into that on Tuesday night. But we're already into it for the third and final round. This is nothing new. At the time of the Crusades, the world followed the Pope because they were afraid of a violent form of Islam. At the time of the Ottomans, the world followed the Pope because they were afraid of a violent form of Islam. What's out there now? There's a violent form of Islam. And the world is watching the papacy ever more as we continue in time. The Pope can say, we're the power that stopped violent Islam twice in history. Join us for the third round. And it's already in progress. If you doubt that, open your eyes and look at what's going on in the world. So this is a little history, but it's showing you where we're going in the near future. Our next presentation is the role of Israel in this growing conflict. And boy, is that getting interesting. And if you would, pull out your response envelope. Hopefully you have an envelope in there. And tonight there are going to be 2 statements, and I'd like to get your responses to them so I can take a look and see how we're doing. Number 1, just circle yes or no, or if you're not sure, put a question mark down beside it. The papacy has led the Christian world in 2 previous conflicts or holy wars with Islam, the Crusades and the Ottomans. If you agree with that, circle yes. You disagree, no. You're not sure, question mark. Number 2, the 15 Bible prophecy characteristics identify the papal system, not Catholic people, as the King of the North or Little Horn. The 15 Bible prophecy characteristics identify the papal system as this King of the North or Little Horn. Yes, no, or question. You know, one day I got an email from a faculty member of a Roman Catholic university. He said, I've been watching your materials online, and he said that second presentation is just a little hard to take. This one. Could you understand why they might say that? But there was a smiley face beside it. I am thinking, what in the world is the smiley face for? But there's still a ways in the message left, so I kept reading. Really curious now. He said, but I'm one of those Catholics you talk about that goes straight to Jesus for their forgiveness. He got the difference between the system and the people. And he realized I wasn't talking about him It was the system. And even though it was hard to take, he could still have a smile about it because he knew there was truth there. That was an interesting email. Okay. Tomorrow evening, the role of Israel. Monday night, time of the end alliance. I'm going to show you who the allies of the king of the north and the king of the south are in this world. And I'm going to show you the role of the United States in Bible prophecy as well. And then on Tuesday night, we're going to have current events. And folks, I can't tell you for sure what's Tuesday night because I don't know what's happening between now and then. I know what's already on the program, but that can change by then. I encourage you to bring anybody you can, especially on Monday and Tuesday nights. Because even if they don't think Bible prophecy exists, they're going to be having a struggle with denying that something's here. Because they're watching what Daniel and Revelation talked about. And so bring people here. I will tell you that Tuesday night typically is a little bit longer. Sorry about that. But there's a lot there. If you want a shorter version, show up Wednesday at 5:45. But it will be shorter and it won't have as much stuff in it. All right? Your choice. I will tell you, usually our biggest attendance is Tuesday night at 7:30. Let's close with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I am thankful for your word. Lord, we can just look at it and see how you've been there all the way through with your people. Thank you that you never leave us alone. And I ask that you will continue to guide us in these very interesting times in which we live. Help us to be loving and more like Jesus, loving people from all sides. In Jesus' name, amen. If you want to, you can, please do drop off that envelope. If you want to put an offering in there, you can, but hear me closely. The gospel is free. You cannot pay for it. But it costs a lot to give it away. And if you want to help give it away, you may.